Alright, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, something we wanted to do for a while. Just a comparison of river knives and obviously some non-river knives. I've been curious for a while to understand how well a knife is going to perform and how they compare to each other. Today we're going to be looking at the NRS Pilot Knife, Co-Pilot Knife. These are the older versions, obviously. I bought one of the newer models. They have 3 versions of the newer model, but the blade looked the same on all of them to me, so I'm going to stick with that same blade. Bear Claw also came out with a newer model, so we're going to be testing those two, the older and the newer. Edelrid Canyoneering Knife. I bought this when I thought there would be no more Bear Claws coming out ever, and it's not as good for some reasons we'll look at in terms of accessibility. This is a Byrd. It's a folding knife, obviously long serrated blade. I've got a couple strap cutters to compare. Obviously very different designs. This one has a very long string on it, as does this set of shears. That's because I use these two for diving. Trauma shears, I do keep this one in my PFD, this one stays in my BCD. This is a knife I use while climbing. And I figured I'd just throw in a steak knife, a few pocket knives, my multi-tool, which does come on the river on longer trips, a bread knife, my standard kitchen knife, and this knife that I used for years and don't really use it as much anymore. But I just want a comparison of a few regular knives compared to some river knives. To get some sort of standardization in the testing, I've got this fishing scale that I've hung up, and I'm going to be clove hitching this old throw rope. Thanks, Tom, for donating a throw rope to this experiment. It's clove hitched to a carabiner, which is attached to this fishing scale. I'm going to apply pressure, try to get every single cut. Let's see, that's kilograms. I'll probably switch that to pounds, but I'm going to get something that reasonably emulates having some pressure on, because I'll be imagining that if I'm cutting anything, it has to have some sort of tension, but I just want similar tension on every cut, and that way we can have a reasonable comparison of how the knives perform against each other. When you're cutting something that's underwater and you can't see, and you're working like this, probability of cutting yourself is unfortunately a little bit high. You know, you're cutting, your hand's right there. So a really easy way to avoid that is to take the hand with the knife, bring it on top of your hand that's holding the object you're going to cut, so that there's no chance at all of cutting yourself. Put the knife right there against it and cut, always away from yourself. And that way you're not likely, you're less likely, I should say, to be slashing your hand that you're using to hold and put tension on whatever it is that you're cutting. I'm going to pull, we'll call it 10 pounds of pressure. I'm going to start with the pilot knife. I'm going to start with this notch because it feels like a thing that I should be doing. Okay, didn't go all the way through. Now I'll start with a serrated blade. Did not go all the way through. Let's do a second cut. Okay, this is way worse than I thought. I'm going to try from the other side. Nah, I don't want to cut toward myself. Okay. That was way more effort than I expected it to be. It did eventually cut. I lost count of how many strokes that was. Okay, onto the Co-Pilot. Doesn't have that little starting notch, so I'm just going to be using the serrated blade. Maybe a cut a little bit less. Okay, so I'm going to pull to around 10 pounds. Cut. And cut. Yeah, 2 cuts. Nice. Onto the newer version of the NRS Pilot Knife. Pull 10 pounds right through. That was all right. They made a huge improvement to the blade, apparently. That was easy. Old school bear claw. 10 pounds. Got bound right through. That's interesting. I've never had an issue with the bear claw before, so let's try that again. 10 pounds. Yeah, it bound again. Newer version of the bear claw. very different blade type. You see it's more of a wave as opposed to these saw blade. All right. 10 pounds. Right through. Edelrid canyoneering knife. So that one actually got all the way through the core and hung up on the back side of the sheath before it cut on the second swipe, which is better than most of the other first stroke fails. Always curious to know if that's just user error, so I'll try again. Nope. It's interesting. These knives with the blade, the serration that sticks out more, they kind of bind along the way. Yeah. The Edelrid is hard to open. You have to press in here to get this plastic to release, and it just takes more force than you want with a finger as you're pulling it out. Aside from the poor performance in the cutting test, the accessibility of the knife is a problem, and so I don't use it. All right, Byrd folding knife. Oh, get that tight. All right. Right through, easy. First strap cutter. Okay. Second strap cutter. This one's a little bit different how you hold it, kind of weird, but okay. Yeah, again, that sawing motion is necessary with these really long serrated teeth. I'm very aware that trauma shears are not the best for cutting rope, but we're gonna give it a shot anyway. 10 pounds. And yet they still worked really well. So now this is the second cutting tool you've seen that has a string on it. That is a scuba thing. Obviously, if you're scuba diving, you need a cutting tool. You don't want to drop it and have it just float to a depth that you're never going to recover it from. Not something I do in whitewater, where the entrapment hazard increase with strings and things dangling all over the place is just an unacceptable risk compared with dropping a knife into the water, which is why I carry multiple knives. But anyway, so larger trauma shears, these are always in my BCD. Easy. Climbing knife, again, it's on a carabiner, a non-locking carabiner. This isn't something I would carry on whitewater, but I figured just for the sake of comparison, I expect this to be less about cutting a rope when I'm climbing than if something gets tangled in a belay device or rappel device and it needs to be cut free for whatever reason. So again, that's like hanging by a strand. That's probably cutter error. Let's find out. Nope, that was worse. Yeah, okay. All right, on to some fun stuff. Pocket knives. This was my daily knife for 5 years. You can see it's been sharpened enough that it's got a little bit of an indentation. Anyway, I haven't sharpened it in a minute, so we'll see how well it does. Pretty bad. Yeah, and yet still it cut through eventually. Next knife type, you know, classic Swiss Army knife. Leatherman. I'm not sure I've ever actually sharpened this blade. Probably should. Steak knife, just, you know, for the sake of comparison, something we got around the house. It's got small serrations inside of the larger ones. That worked really well. Onto my bread knife. This is what I use when I'm cutting foam, when I'm building bulkheads or any kind of foot hip pads that are customized to my boats for me. It works amazing for cutting foam. See how it works on ropes. Yeah, well, just given the rope debris, it cut through pretty quickly. I don't use that much of the blade. This is the knife I use to cook most nights. Clearly, I need to sharpen it. The knife I used to use way more often than I do now, mostly because the handle broke. It'd be kind of fun to see if it even survives. The handle, that is, attempting to cut this rope. I can feel it, it's loose. Alright, well, not terrible. Yeah. I am, as of right now, because this was an enlightening experience for me, using my new bear claw instead of the older one with those sharp serrated teeth. This is immediately on my PFD right now. What else do I have in my PFD? So the bear claw goes right here. The reason for that is it's highly accessible. I can get it with this hand. I can get it with this hand. I did a knife class at a Swiftwater Rescue Conference once, and the first thing, we all showed up. I said, all right, everybody close your eyes, get your knife out. How long does it take? Okay. Do it with the other hand. Okay. I am blade down, away from myself, unlikely to cut myself when it comes out. That's extremely important to me. It is possible to drop your knife. You need something else. I used to keep that strap cutter right in here. Like I said, as of today, I'm not doing that anymore. I will instead, if I drop my knife, have to go into my pocket and get this folding knife. Now, there's a little string on here. That string is so that it can be single hand open. And now I've got a knife that I can use, that I was able to access with one hand. It is much slower to access than this one. However, it is still, in spite of being a folding knife, something I can open with one hand and cut. And you saw this during the demo, it cuts very well. So yeah, all of my cutting tools